Okay, good afternoon and welcome back. We are going to kick things off with session 4 now. So before I pass things over to Derek, just a couple of administrative announcements. Um, this session is being recorded. All meeting materials will be made available, including the recording, following the conclusion of our event. Just a reminder to give us a few days to turn those materials around and make sure they're 508 accessible to all. And then in addition, there's going to be a Q&A session, time permitting, at the end of our presentation. Please put your questions in the Zoom chat if you would like them to be answered. And then we'll go ahead and get those all published to the CCSQ DNA portal as well. And I think with that, we are good to go to pass things over to Derek. And I will go ahead and stop sharing so you can take over, Derek. Did you
Thank
want me to
you.
go through any of your slides before I pass
I,
things over to you?
I can just go ahead and share and then,
Okay.
yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We good?
Yep, looks good.
All right, sweet. Yeah. So let's dive in to something that I think has a lot of intricacies to it that aren't super well spelled out. And that is beneficiary in the cloud BIC data that is offered and available in the CDR. Um, so kind of going to walk through, what is the overall purpose of it? What does it include? Talk about two main tables and what their differences are when it comes to beneficiary information. I'm going to demonstrate how we can link across all of the different BIC tables, talk through the differences between entitlement, enrollment, and coverage. And then I'm going to actually map out this concept of something that I came across when I first started. It was referred to as cross-referencing. It was certainly something that was more relevant at the time with Hicken values, although it is still relevant today with MBIs, just not quite as relevant due to a lot less changing happening within a beneficiary and their identifier. And then I'm going to, jump into Databricks and show some actual example code of all of this stuff. So, what is BIC data? BIC data contains beneficiary demographics, entitlement, enrollment, premium, health status, and other different types of coverage information. It's actually stored within the CMS enterprise data mesh. And we have our own internal process that goes out, extracts all of the DDL information, and refreshes the database tables within our metadata catalog. However, the actual physical objects are not actually stored within our CDR. They are stored within the EDM. Uh, However, obviously, with every sort of database table, there are two concepts of a metadata catalog and then the actual physical file objects where the data resides. So, with that, talk about some of the beneficiary tables. And I apologize if I go through very quickly on a lot of this stuff. I feel like a lot of people probably want to see more of the code, and I've only got so much time, and I tend to chat a lot. So I'm going to try and make this more valuable than me just kind of talking. So there's two main beneficiary tables. There's the beneficiary table, and then there's a beneficiary status table. Main differences here are that the beneficiary status table actually includes active and archived records for all of the active beneficiaries. Um, you'll notice, and I'll show it to you, there is an archived status column within the table that you can filter on so that you can get essentially what is the beneficiary table in all of the core information. There are differences in the information that is being made available between the two tables. As far as why, I'm not 100% certain. But you'll notice in beneficiary status, that's where you would want to get MBI, whereas beneficiary only would have a couple of columns that you can concatenate to get you the HIC value. As I've previously mentioned, there are two main beneficiary identifiers. A long time ago, not really long time ago, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, it used to be HICN, the health insurance claim number. That was the concatenation of a claim account number, also referred to as a CAN, and then the beneficiary identification code, which is the BIC. That was changed, I believe, around 2018, 2019, where CMS rolled out the Medicare Beneficiary Identifier, or MBI. And this, like I said, is available within the beneficiary status table and not the beneficiary table. The main thing to know about the BIC tables is that there are two fields that are column keys that should be utilized whenever you're linking tables together. And that is going to be your beneficiary partition field, as well as the beneficiary key, which is a unique internal identifier. There are geographic tables that you can bring in with your beneficiary information to bring in, your beneficiary's mailing address, such as, state, city, zip. But there's also this state county scrubbed table, which includes historical information, where the mailing address scrub table is really only going to include what is the current mailing address. So a lot of the times in the past, state county scrub table is what I've always utilized and been able to pull as of the time that I'm running it to get what is current. And again, there are these specific fields referred to as audit identifier, as well as start and end date comparisons that you can utilize in your filters to pull something as of a certain point in time, or as you'll see how I'm gonna do it is like as of today that I'm pulling it. Entitlement, enrollment, and coverage. A lot of the time, some of these things can be used and are interchangeable. And as you'll see with some of the BIC table names, the definitions don't really kind of match exactly the table names. Overall, what an entitlement means is essentially just a person that meets the requirements and they can receive the benefits that Medicare offers. It doesn't necessarily mean they are actively covered or they are actively enrolled. It just means they are entitled to it. Enrollment is actually when a person is receiving coverage of some kind and they are enrolled in the Medicare benefits. And then, of course, there is coverage, which is very specific to the type of service or item that a person would be covered by. This could be Part A coverage, Part B coverage. More recently, your prescription drugs, which is your Part D coverage, and something that is very much more relative over the past handful of years, which is your Medicare Advantage HMO type of Part C coverage. The main entitlements for Part A or Part B coverage are going to obviously be, someone is aged into Medicare benefits at the age of 65 or older. They are disabled or they have end-stage renal disease, which is obviously referred to as ESRD. So relevant tables. And again, this is kind of where it doesn't make a ton of sense how the tables are being named, because we have an entitlement reason table, which is really sort of the whole point in time around why a beneficiary or how the beneficiary meets entitlement to Medicare benefits. There is the entitlement Part A and entitlement Part B tables. Obviously, in the table name, you would not assume it, but this is actually entitlement and coverage history. So it talks about, as of a certain point in time, you can identify what beneficiaries had Part A coverage or Part B coverage, and when that sort of started and stopped, to take a look at the history of particular beneficiaries and whether or not they were covered. Obviously, there is a hospice coverage table as well. And this actually makes sense because it's called coverage in the name, but this lets you know about current and historical coverage around hospice for certain beneficiaries. Um, Around Part C and Part D coverage is your enrollment MAPD. MA Medicare Advantage, PD Part D. Again, it's not necessarily coverage, but it talks at least about they are enrolled in Medicare Advantage or enrolled in a prescription drug plan where you can utilize, again, effective dates, disenrollment dates to get point in time logic, as well as, there's this program type column which has mappings that lets you know whether or not it was Medicare Advantage or prescription drugs, or if it was both. And then there is a dual eligible table that also lays out whether or not beneficiaries were eligible for Medicaid. There are specific dual status code values that you can utilize to map whether or not they were eligible. And this table lists the beneficiaries at an eligibility year and month point in time that you can easily manipulate to find out whether or not a particular beneficiary was Medicaid eligible during a certain point in time in the past. And then there's what I talked about as the cross-reference concept. What is it? So at any time, a beneficiary could be given a new beneficiary, Medicare beneficiary identifier. And I'm going to keep this very specific to MBI right now, since that's more relevant than HICN. Although if you go back in time, HICN will be more relevant. But this concept and the term cross-reference, what it really means is that you're going in and identifying all of the possible MBI values that a single beneficiary may have had across their lifetime being enrolled in Medicare benefits. So obviously, what the current MBI value is for a certain beneficiary may not be what it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It may be the same. But the idea here is we want to be able to identify all MBIs that a specific beneficiary may have had throughout their life, to be able to then go back in time to extract claims that are specific for that beneficiary. And we're going to be able to be confident that we're pulling all possible claims because we're including all possible MBI values for that beneficiary. So an example, let's say John Smith has this MBI value that was effective January 1st, 2021 through May of 2023. And then they got a new MBI, maybe due to fraud, maybe due to some security thing where their information was released to the public or something, and they requested a new value, a new identifier. So at that time, they were given it, and that is currently what it is. So let's say we go and we want to know between the for the year of 2024, maybe there's a specific type of claim we're looking for, and we want all of the unique beneficiaries that had this specific type of claim. So when we have this, we now want to say, okay, we've got our list of beneficiaries, but we want to pull historical claims, not just the specific claim we're looking for, but we also want to pull historical claims, as well as claims that maybe occurred after the time period. Well, if we go to simply say, okay, let's take this one value that we found at the time we pulled it. Again, when we look at it being in 2024, we would have pulled the 9B values, right? So now if we go to say, okay, let's pull all claims for this beneficiary that were greater than the date that this beneficiary's MBI value switched, we're going to be good. But if we want anything prior to that date, we're not going to be able to extract those claims. So the idea here is that there is some sort of a cross-reference process that happens where we can now say, okay, here is the current value of the MBI for this beneficiary, and here is our MBI lookup values, which is basically the different values on the MBI that this beneficiary has had over its lifetime. And now when we go to pull claims, historically all the way through, we're going to use this MBI lookup to pull those claims, and we're going to include both of those MBI values so that we know for a fact we're going to be able to pull claims when this beneficiary had a different MBI than what it was that we identified in the period we were interested in. Again, realizing that's a lot of information. The main point of this is to kind of get through this so that I can get to the notebook. Let me zoom in a little bit. So this should be available to everybody, I believe. You should all have view access to it. But as we walk through it, it's going to show the different things that I talked about. Here's all of the different tables that I went ahead and displayed just within the beneficiary data schema that are available to us. Again, here is where I'm going to lay it out and talk specifically about the main beneficiary tables. As you can see here, in one of them, I am pulling from the actual beneficiary table. I'm filtering it where death date was either sometime during this year or the death date is currently null. And here I'm going to pull the exact same thing. Death date is this year or it's null, but I'm pulling it from the beneficiary status table, and I'm going to go ahead and count all of these beneficiary counts as well as unique counts to be able to then group this by archive status. And what you're going to see is that these the beneficiary table is going to match up with the counts where this archive status is equal to 1, meaning this is the active current status. It's kind of opposite of what you would think, which is what the beneficiary table actually shows in the first place. Probably should just let it go. But you'll see here also where I talked about in the beneficiary table, there is no Medicare beneficiary identification code. The Medicare beneficiary identifier, it's in the beneficiary status code. So that's why this status table is a little bit more relevant at times, because you can get what is the current MBI value as of the date you're pulling it. But what you can see here is we've got specific count of beneficiaries, as well as a unique count. And then what you're going to see here is when the archive status is a value of 1, it's actually going to match. But if I was not to look at an archive status value, then I'd be pulling in non-active records that exist within this beneficiary status table, which is why these two tables are not always showing the same count in records, because there is that difference in some of these being archived. I can come back to that. So here I am going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in some additional beneficiary demographic information. You can see I'm using beneficiary status as my initial table. I want to go ahead and interjoin that with the beneficiary table so that I can bring in date of death, whether or not the death date is actually verified. I can also bring in gender and race. And then I'm also joining our status table with the state county scrub table to bring in the beneficiary state, county, and zip. And what you'll notice here, is I am looking at the audit identifier equal to a V, which means it's valid, it's been audited. And the end date is null, meaning it is currently active. And so with that, you can see here, I went ahead and pulled it previously, and just a quick little function here to give me counts and percentages that we can see all of these values, verified death, Obviously, we would expect the vast majority of them to be null because we're looking at only where the death date is was this year. And then looking at calculating it by age group, you can see the vast majority of the different beneficiary age categories is going to be, 65 to 74, 74 to 84, 75 to 84. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of 65 to 74 continuing to increase with baby boomers retiring and becoming 65. But we do have those that are less than 65, which are going to be your disabled entitlements and your ESRD entitlements. And then looking at state code. One thing to note, obviously, this is not your state abbreviation. It is a state code. And it's important to understand that the state code comes from the Social Security Administration. So I do have a link here that actually shows mappings of these beneficiary state codes and what they would map back to. If you're curious about that, you will see some pretty crazy things. Values equal to Africa or Asia, Europe, Mexico, stuff that you wouldn't maybe necessarily expect to see. But because there are beneficiaries that have they are entitled, they are covered, and they may be living in different areas. Currently, there is this ability where could not be potentially they don't have a state code mapping back to one of the 50 states or one of the U.S. territories. This section really kind of gets more into polling coverage data. And like I said, looking at audit sequence equal to 0, as well as the stop date being null, this is going to be able to pull us all Part A coverage that is current. Again, we're looking at beneficiary status and linking it with entitlement Part A. Here's our Part B coverage, exact same thing. Hospice coverage, it's a little bit different. Hospice, a lot of the times, you may not see termination dates being null. They could be, mostly depending on their stays and how it's being billed and covered. There could be termination dates that are sort of in the future. So it's a little bit different when you're looking at hospice coverage compared to like your standard Part A, Part B. And then there's obviously your Medicare Advantage and your prescription drugs coverage here. Again, talking about program type, you can see sort of the mappings here. Vast majority of users that or beneficiaries that have current coverage or current enrollment within one of these are going to be either it's prescription drugs or they have both Part C and prescription drugs. Then your dual eligibility. The main thing I wanted to get down to is this concept of beneficiary cross-referencing. This kind of lays out what the overall process is and what we're doing. But going through it, it's kind of a step-by-step process where we're extracting a unique list of beneficiaries. In this instance, we're looking for those that had a inpatient claim where the service date ended within the month of January of this year, and we're looking for it was an acute care hospital. Obviously, we now have our unique list of beneficiaries. Now we want to go and we're going to extract all of our current and previous MBI values to create this sort of cross-reference file. What I've done here is I've kept a lot of this just within SQL. It's probably not best practice. You probably would want to kind of bring some of this stuff in memory into a Spark data frame using PySpark or SparklyR to kind of manipulate the data. But for the purpose of this works just fine. And so what we're doing again here is we're utilizing beneficiary status, as well as we're utilizing the Medicare beneficiary identifier table linked to the beneficiary status table. This is going to give us everything that is current everything that potentially is historical. And then I'm using a sort of window function here to remove duplicate values of what that MBI value is to create this sort of final cross-reference table. We have then taken that final cross-reference table to say, okay, let's bring in all of the current MBI values for our unique list of beneficiaries. And then for those current MBI values, we're then going to bring in all historical MBI values that those have had to then remove duplicates and have this final finder file. So again, here was my original beneficiary specific table, bringing in a current MBI value, and then taking that current MBI value and bringing in all possible MBI values that we identified within our cross-reference table. And then we're going to just simply another window function to take a look at what our final finder looks like. And what you'll see here is we have a little bit more MBIs than we do current MBIs, which is what you would expect to see. And this is a really good kind of way to look at what the heck we just did, where this match type is looking at, of all of the values we identified that were unique for the beneficiaries in the 1 month we pulled, we identified that what we pulled, either the historical and current MBIs matched, or what we pulled was actually a historical and is not the current. And that is this finder in both match type. What you'll see here
Hey,
is this.
Derek.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have just about one more minute though
Okay.
before we'll
Yep.
need to wrap up.
My bad. But basically, what I wanted to show for the most part is this XREF. We gained about 70,000 or so MBI values that were historical on these unique beneficiaries. So now we can take this list and join it back with historical claims, knowing that we've got all of our MBI values that all of these beneficiaries have had without their lifetime, so that we can be confident and we're going to be pulling all of the claims for them. Yeah, that definitely went about 5 minutes longer than I thought. So my apologies, Julia.
No worries, that's okay. Benefits of built-in brakes is that we have a little wiggle room. So thank you so much to Derek. I think one of our questions is still left unanswered, but I went ahead and jotted that down so we can get that to Derek later and we can get a response to that. But at this point, I am going to close out our session. So thank you so much to Derek and Oren for helping in the chat, and then our attendees.